Thank you for joining me for Session 10 in the Lifeway study of 1st and 2nd Kings. The title of the lesson is God Honors. The text is 2 Kings chapter 12, verses 4 through 16. And the lesson summary statement is God honors people who demonstrate God's priorities. What's the most read section in the newspaper? People guess the front page, others guess editorials, most guess the funny papers, some the sports section. The most read section of a newspaper are the obituaries. It's the only article in the newspaper in which the information came from the deceased or from the family of the deceased. The obituary is the closest that comes to explaining a person. It tells what a person thought the most of, and what they thought the least of, and what they neglected and didn't think at all. I'm sure at some time or another you've read an obituary and then your first thought was there was no mention of God, no expression of faith in this obituary. I'm going to copy off my neighbor's obituary. Bonnie was my neighbor for nearly 20 years. Her and Bob were the best neighbors I've ever had. We moved away from them several years ago, but her obituary is just a beautiful testimony of her life. I'm out in the yard many years ago working, and Bonnie comes out in her softball uniform, and happily she says, "I'm going to celebrate my 60th birthday playing softball." She was my hero. And I'm going to read that to her and just ask the class, what does this reveal about Bonnie? And it reveals a very caring, a very serving, a faith-centered person. From that, I want to take them back to the lesson summary statement. It says, God honors people who demonstrate God's priorities. And I like to take time to just pick these phrases apart and come to understand in a bigger picture, in a broader way, what the lesson is seeking to teach us. For example, this word honor, it has about it reputation. That is, a person has a good name, or there's public esteem that's associated with a person. It also has about it the idea of recognition, showing of a usually merited respect. So there's this idea of reputation, a good name, and there's this idea of respect. So God will honor these people. That is, He will enhance their reputation. He will display them as someone worthy of respect. God honors people who demonstrate. The word demonstrate has about something to show clearly. There's no question of who these people are. So God makes clear, God lifts up, God improves the reputation of people who clearly show something. And what is it they clearly show? God's priorities. That is, His priorities, the things that are important to God, are superior in rank, in position, and in privilege. They make those things what are first in their life. So, God gives a good name. God shows respect and recognition to people who clearly show that what's most important in their life are the things of God. So this is what our lesson is about in session 10. Let me give you just a bit of a background to what's happening. The Lord has promised David that his line would be an eternal line, and it would last forever. You can see that in Psalm 89, verse 4 and verse 29. So the continuation of David's line is essential for the fulfillment of Jesus Christ. If David's line perishes, we perish because there's not the fulfillment of the Messiah. Well, because of Jehoram's purge of his brothers, and that's in 2 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 4, and because of the killing of the royal family by Philistine and Arab raiders, that's in 2 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 16 through 17, and because of the slaughter of her grandsons by Athaliah, who was Jehoram's wife, 2 Kings chapter 11, verse 1, there's only one male child that survives the Davidic line, and it's this child, Joash. So this story has greater significance than just this picture of them refurbishing the temple. This boy, everything hinges on him when it comes to the Davidic line. Now, Joash's name means fire of God, and there's a sense in which that fire was almost extinguished, but God prevented it. And there's also a sense in which he at one time had a fire for God in demonstrating its desire for the glory of God and for the temple to be repaired and restored. So the first thing that we see in this lesson is the problem. God honors people who demonstrate God's priorities, and that's seen in the way Joash deals with the problem. In chapter 12, verse 4, it says, "Then Joash said to the priest, all the dedicated silver brought to the Lord's temple, census silver, silver from vows, and all silver voluntarily given for the Lord's temple, each priest is to take it from his assessor and repair whatever damage is found in the temple." And I would ask people to read all the way through that, through verse 8. I might do that. And then just give this simple breakdown of what we've read. There's an order that a certain type of money is to be used for the repairs of the temple. That's verse 4. And then Joash discovers that the repairs are not being made. That's verse 6. And then he holds the priest responsible for the delay in the repairs to the temple. That's verse 7 and 8. So that's clearly what's happening here. Now, the thing that is puzzling is why the temple wasn't being repaired by the priest. You would think if there was anyone who was most interested in seeing that happen, it would have been the priest, but they neglect it. And the temple is about 125 to 150 years of age, and so there has to be some decline in it, and it has been abused. We know that from 2 Chronicles, where it says that Athaliah's sons robbed the temple and abused the temple in order to enrich the temple to Baal. And so here is the temple 125 to 150 years old. It's been in a state of neglect for many, many years, and they don't do anything about it. It could have been that the work was so large that where do you get started? And let me just give you an example. Let's combine our honeydews. I want to ask the class, what are some of the jobs that you have around the house that you still need to get done? It may be, for example, you need to do something in straightening out the garage or organizing the garage. Or maybe there's some kind of repair that needs to be made to doors or cabinets. Or maybe there's a leak or a room that needs to be painted. We could just make a whole list, and that's just the people in the room. Can you imagine what it would be like for the temple after 125 to 150 years old? And what I'm wanting to do is just get the idea of the size of job that is facing these priests. The scripture never gives us an explanation as to why they don't do this. And so it'd just be pure speculation for us to guess why. But their failure to prioritize the work has a clear consequence, and that is they miss out on the opportunity to do something to restore the temple and to bring the glory back to the temple and back to God. The word priority means what goes first. Its root is the word prior, P-R-I-O-R. And that's these things are done first as opposed to that which is to be done later. Now, if you had asked the priest what they claim is the priority in their life, what do you suppose they would name? And I'd ask the class to help me with that. Just write some of those on the board. Now, what I'm saying to the class is this is what they claim is priority. But not only do we have priorities that we claim, we have priorities, a second set of priorities that we live by day in and day out. These are our actual priorities. So there are priorities that we claim, and there are priorities that we live, the ones that we actually do. And so what are some of the priorities that people actually live? They claim this, but what they actually do is this. What are some of those priorities? Maybe it's work a little harder, or I want something a little nicer to drive, or I want a little nicer home, or maybe it's I want to get a little higher on the corporate ladder. Something along those lines. Well, what is the problem? They've spent time doing less important things, while the more important went unattended. Here they have their priorities they claim. These, they say, are what most important. But here are the priorities that they live. So they must have spent their time on these priorities instead of spending their time and energies and thoughts on what they claim to be most important. So here's the point I'm wanting to make with the class. A priority means it comes first before other things. So that means it needs to be done now. When it comes to making the difference between these two priorities, what we claim and what we live, the way we move from what we live to what we claim is you have to make the decision, I'm going to do it now. So what are the priorities for our life? What are you going to do now to follow up with those? So the second point I'm driving at is solution. Again, I would have a member of the class, or I might read verses 9 through 12, and then just point out that the priests agree to distance themselves from the collection and the distribution system. And Joash comes up with a new method. And the new method is, the people are going to give the money in this chest, and the priest will be there. And then once that chest is full, there are two people that are going to count the money, people with high integrity, the royal secretary and the high priest. They're going to count the money, and then they will distribute it to supervisors. And those supervisors are going to give it directly to skilled workers who will do the work. The writer is very interested in these details. And one commentator said the reason why he's so interested in these details is because there are changes that are being made in the way the people view the temple. The temple will no longer be a personal chapel of the king in which he provides for it by his finances, and it's under his control. The temple is not going to be a religious institution that's run by the priests for their own benefit. He says what's happening here is this is becoming the house of God, and it's financed by the public giving. And all of the people are going to have an investment in this. The plan has two qualities to it. There is accountability and there is abundance. The people give greatly. And Joash gives people responsibility for certain tasks. They're the ones who are going to be there where the money is collected. And then those who will count the money. And then those who will take it and see that it's distributed to the work that needs to be done. And then there are those who actually use the money to do the work. Everyone is given a task they are responsible for. They own this task. And I'm asking the class if they'll look at the question on page 96. And it talks about what does our giving reveal about our priorities. And so I want to take some time to talk about what does it reveal about our priorities, our giving. Someone has said that if you want to know someone's real priorities, just ask them, just look at their checkbook, and they'll tell you what's most important to their life. And I'm going to tell two stories. One happens to do with a person who went out to lunch with me and my father. This was a long time ago. My father's one of those men that you have to sneak around in order to pay the bill ahead of time, or he'll pay for it. But somehow in this occasion, He didn't pay for everybody that was there. And so my dad paid his bill, and he gives a generous tip, and I paid mine and I tipped. And this friend that was with us saw how much my dad tipped. And because my dad's giving was generous, he chose not to tip. And I made the decision at that point, I will never go out and eat with that person again, because it revealed to me something about the stinginess of their own heart. And so I'm going to ask the church, ask the class, what does it reveal? What does it tell you about a person who won't tip a young person who's serving the best they can on your Sunday meal? And then the second story I'm going to tell is about a woman. It's in this church. She raised her children by herself. And when I came to the church, she worked at a bank, and she sold Avon. And when it came time to distribute telephone books, her and her kids went all over our community distributing telephone books. She did numbers of things like that to make enough money to provide for her family. And that woman never stopped tithing. She always had this limited income. It was always very close. By the way, I should tell you, she had 6 children. And now some of them were out of the home by the time I came around and became her pastor. But she raised those kids on that kind of a lifestyle, and she never stopped tithing. Her testimony was very powerful to me in being responsible for the church's finances. But what does her value, her priority of giving, what does that tell you about her and her relationship to God? That's examples that I'm going to use to delve into that question. And then I want the people to look at this truth at this point. God honors people who demonstrate God's priority. And it says He provided a solution. And what He did in providing a solution is He gave ownership to the different persons. There's a book called 12 Weeks Year, the 12-Week Year, and the author has a very interesting concept about accountability. He said most of us think of accountability as consequences, but he said accountability is not consequences, it's ownership. You take ownership of that, and he said that is a game changer for the way you think about things. And in a sense, that's what I see happening here, is Joash gave these people an ownership when it came to repairing the temple. There were those who were responsible and they owned it when it came to fixing the actual physical building itself. There were others who their ownership, this is what I do. I count the money. And so they owned that issue. So this is my question to the class. What would change about your perspective if you had the perspective that God has a solution for my finances, and the solution starts with this: I own this money. And I don't mean by that a lack of stewardship. We know God owns it, but I mean I own the responsibility of this money. He's entrusted me with X amount of dollars. And it's not the economy that is the most controlling factor in my life. It's not my expenses, though those things all, of course, have a factor. But I choose how I'm going to distribute this money. Not just that, but it comes to my family. This is my family. And so I'm responsible. I'm the owner of how I'm going to relate to them, what I'm going to build my values on when it comes to my family. So what I'm trying to drive at is the solution that Joash gives is he gives ownership to these various people. And what would change in people's lives if they accepted the idea, I own this life. God wants me He's given me these abilities, He's given me this opportunity, He's placed me in this moment in life. I own that. And so how do I respond responsibly to that action? I hope that's clear. I'm sorry if I'm confusing on that, but I do believe that could be a game changer for people. No more excuses, no more passing the buck. This is my responsibility. This is where God has me. This is where God's blessed me with these things. How do I responsibly use them? I think that would be a wonderful mindset in finding solutions. Now, the third point is action. Again, I'd have someone read verses 13 through 16. The king wanted to be sure that the temple repair would see the result of the people's investment. And so he develops a system of integrity, and he staffs it with people of integrity. You have to have both of those, a system of integrity and people of integrity. We belong to an organization called Union Baptist Association. It's almost 80 churches in Cleveland and McLean County. And we contribute on a monthly basis to the broader work of the kingdom through Union Baptist Association. They have a system of integrity when it comes to reporting the finances that churches have given to the association. And this system of integrity over the years has revealed, since I've been a part of the association, 2 people who were abusing the church's finances. One was a secretary who was pilfering the funds, and this system of integrity caught her. Another was a church treasurer, and this system caught that person as well. And so there needs to be a system of integrity and people of integrity. Joash's priority was to see the glory of God restored and God worshiped. That was what was high on his list. That was his priority. This was prior to everything else. He wasn't going to give them leftover time. He wasn't giving it leftover money. He wasn't giving it leftover energy. He wasn't distracted. What's the evidence that you see in these texts that he is resolved by his actions to make this a priority? And I'm wanting him to think through the text. Where is that seen? Where does his actions reveal that he is demonstrating? He's clearly showing that these things of God come prior. So we talk about that. And then I'm going to give them an envelope. And I have a devotional. I have 2 copies of a devotional that were written for people who were in military service. I'm going to give those to the men, but I've taken 2 devotions out of one of them. They're front and back, so there's 4 devotions. I'm going to put it in an envelope, and I'm going to give from this devotional, I'm going to give those to the men. And Radio Bible Class discovered that if you read the Bible 4 times a week, it will make a noticeable and impact on your spiritual life. You will change. So I'm going to ask them for priority this week. They may already do it, but there no doubt will be some who struggle to make Bible reading consistent. I'm just going to give them this envelope, and I'm going to say, would you, over the course of 4 days that you can find this week, read one of these devotions and have time of prayer that is suggested on that devotion. I'll find a different one that I'll give to the ladies, and what I'm trying to do is move them to make spending time with God in the scriptures and prayer a priority. Just a simple way to get them started on that. Now, to close the lesson, I'm going to use the suggestion in Go Explore the Bible. It's about a man. He was the oldest survivor who received a Medal of Honor during World War II. His name was Herschel Woody Williams. He did a heroic effort with a flamethrower on Iwo Jima. It tells you something of the story there. And he died June 29th at the age of 98. And it gives you some information about how he lived, how that experience influenced the rest of his life to make an impact upon people. That experience made his service and help to other veterans a priority in his life. And I want to read that to them. And it ends with this question: what can you do to make others' lives better and more meaningful? And that, if we have time, that may be something that we will discuss. If not, I'm going to ask them to write it on their envelope as they have their time of Bible study this week. What a wonderful lesson. I've really enjoyed these times in 2 Kings, and I know you have and your class has. God bless you for watching.